Floriculture and landscape gardening. In our ordinary life, we call flowers those plants that have bright and beautiful parts, smell nice, and as a rule attract different insects. Humans have eyes glued on them in nature and use to decorate their homes for ages. Traditional flowers are presented to friends, acquaintances, and close people on some memorable events or even just as a hobby. Some types of flowers grow in the natural environment, a forest, a meadow, or a pond. Other people plant them in suburban areas, decorate their urban flower beds, and grow them at windowsills. In biology, the term flower means a modified shortened node that serves for seed reproduction. Fruit with seeds forms exactly in the place of flowers. Not all flowers can be bright. There are completely unpresentable ones, white or green. There exist both big flowers and both extremely small flowers. Some of them are fragrant, others almost do not smell. A great variety of different plants live on our planet. Naturally, they do well on their own, grow and propagate without requiring additional care. In wildlife, there are all conditions for it. Rain provides moisture. Trees, shadow, and open meadows have no interference for sunlight. Unfortunately, not all plants can survive outside the natural habitat without human help. For example, the majority of decorative and pot flowers, they need watering, fertilization, protection from pests, assistance in reproduction. Flower production is art, creativity, and science all at the same time. From ancient times, a human engaged plant cultivation. He was studying how to provide shoots with everything necessary, learned how to manage their growth and development. Having read this book, you will get acquainted with the basics of gardening and learn about the possibilities of preserving natural diversity. We will not just tell you what flowers are, but also teach you how to grow them at home and in the garden. Help you become a defender of rare plants to prevent their disappearance. On top of that, try to apply the gained knowledge. We are sure you will succeed. Chapter 1. The World of Plants. We can see plants everywhere, in the forest, in the park, in the yard, at home. This kingdom of wildlife is extremely countless. As of right now, scientists know more than 320,000 plant species, and how many of them have not been described yet, without their subspecies and cultivars species. The flora of our plant is amazing and diverse, and the plant life has its own laws and features. Botany studies plants. In order to study and compare plants, scientists created a classification that divides all plants into groups based on similar characteristics: texture, presence of flowers, seeds, and etc. Systematics distributes organisms based on proximity of kinship. Similar to each other, closely related plants appear in one group. The biggest classification unit of living organisms is a domain that includes kingdoms, and the smallest one is species. Plants, as other living organisms, cannot live forever. Yearling plants live just 1 year, whereas perennial ones can be alive for several years. There are real long-lived plants. So, the baobab tree may live to be 3,000 years old. The age of the oldest spruce is 9,550 years. Plants can vary in their appearance or life form. The most basic classification has 3 main forms of life: trees, shrubs, and herbs. Chapter 2. Methods of studying plants. Why do you go to school? Perhaps in order to learn something new every day. Do you remember when in the first grade you first learned letters and numbers, and then with their help you were able to read books and solve math problems? Teachers showed you different experiments, taught to observe, analyze, and draw conclusions. In addition, you probably attend school in order to communicate with your friends. Tell me please, do you have a friend? Do you know what he or she wants for his or her birthday? Only knowing her hobbies and interests, you can make your friend a gift that he or she will be happy above all things on the face of the earth. In order to study plants properly and learn how to manage their growth and development, first, you have to study the places and conditions in which they grow, get acquainted with those who live nearby, and understand what plants like and what do not. You have to become a real friend to them. In return for it, you will receive the most valuable gift, extraordinary beauty, fabulous aroma, and infinite perfection of wildlife. Botany and any other science uses different research methods. Purposefully observing the plant, for example, is growth and development. We use such a scientific method as observation when we define certain characteristics, whether they are external characteristics or features of the ecological relationships. We make a description of the object of interest. During experiments, we ourselves set the conditions of development and get to know accurately what factors are and how they affect the plant. So as to study the plant naturally, it is necessary to be observed, conduct field studies, and then analyze the acquired information. It is very crucial to investigate plants that are endangered. For that purpose, even the Red Book was created, which includes rare and endangered species of animals, plants, and mushrooms. The Red Book of Moscow was established in 2001 for the conservation of species, the number of which has been decreasing in the city. What main measures are offered by the Red Book to conserve endangered species of plants? 1. It is forbidden to collect, sell, or purchase wild plants from the Red Book. 2. It is necessary to conserve plants in the protected areas. 3. It is crucial to conserving relevant natural habitats for rare and endangered species. Another way of studying flowers is to prepare a herbarium. In order to create it properly, it is not enough just to dry a leaf or flower. It is essential to follow clear-cut rules, which can be quite complex. 1. The best thing is to collect whole specimens of small plants with all their parts and organs, because any characteristic and feature can be important to determine. If it is a big plant, you need to take a whole branch. The sample should not be wet. The root system should be thoroughly cleaned. It is more preferable to find flowering specimens for convenience of further study. 2. The plant has to be carefully placed on the newspaper and then spread. It is important to avoid bends and overlays. Flowers can be laid with a paper napkin for better conservation. 3. Afterwards, put a newspaper sheet with a sample in the herbarium folder, close it, and dry it under the press, and then attach it to a sheet of thick paper with glue and thread, if necessary. 4. It is obligatory to put the label with important information on the sheet with a sample, a scientific name, a plant community, a geographical location of the place of collection, a description of the relief, soil from which the collection was made, data on collectors, full name, position, place of study or work, data of collection. 5. Children's herbarium can be carefully glued in a suitable album, providing a label with the data that you can specify, the name of the plant, who, when and where collected the sample. We strongly recommend you to start collecting small samples without thick and massive parts. Such samples are easier to dry. First of all, herbarium collections have a scientific value. Herbarium has background information, samples for the determination of the comparative method, serves as a benchmark. Beyond that point, plant supervision in nature, their collection and herbarium creation is a productive and fascinating way to know more about Green Kingdom. Systematics of plants is impossible without herbarium collections. In addition, properly collected and beautifully decorated herbarium can become an interior decoration. The essential method of research in plant cultivation is a field experiment. It is necessary to be carried out on the same spot several times, controlling various factors and estimating their impacts. For instance, changing any factor and leaving others unchanged, we can understand how this factor affects a plant and its development. Estimate environmental properties of various types in the same boat. During field researches, the following information is studied: effects of temperature, light, and soil, fertilizers effects, technology of soil processing, weed control methods. According to duration, field researches are divided into short-term, 3 to 10 years, long, 10 to 50 years, long-term, over 50 years. The most important characteristic of the study of plants is their growth. It is studied by means of the following methods: measure the germ with the ruler, use a microscope to study growth at the cellular level, measure the growth rate of the shoot tip with an Aux's onometer. Chapter 3. Why do plants need to stay alive? What do you need to live? That's right, you need to eat, drink and sleep to recharge your energy after a busy day. Plants are also living things. They, as animals, can breathe and eat, but only on their own. They eat different food, not like ours. So what do plants need to live? Firstly, plants can breathe. Breathing in all organs of a plant occurs continuously. If it stops, a plant can die. Even a tiny germ seed needs oxygen. How does this process happen? When breathing, organic substances are broken down, releasing energy that the plant uses for growth, reproduction, and other vital processes. Green plants are able to create organic matters from non-organic ones, using the light energy, primarily the sun, to receive their. This process is called photosynthesis, from the Greek words light and synthesis, putting together. The photosynthetic capacity is the most important property of green plants. In consequence of photosynthesis, oxygen releases as a byproduct. That is why photosynthesis is a key process by which all living organisms on Earth can breathe oxygen. Secondly, for normal growth and development, plants need nutrition, water, mineral, and organic matters. The water regime of plants is equally important as well. Water is the major component of plant bodies, up to 90% of their weight. Being in the soil, roots absorb water and minerals, which are transported to the leaves through vessels inside the roots and stems. The leaves in their turn soak up sunshine and provide roots with photosynthesis products. This mutual exchange happens providing the presence of conductive tissue, a transport system that connects different parts of the plant and ensures the transfer of matters from one part to another. Transport of matters. The two critical functions of plants are growth and reproduction. Growth takes place on all levels of life. By virtue of elongation, the root grows in the soil. By means of a continuous growth of shoots, the coverage of a new area increases constantly. Plants can receive more light and carbon dioxide needed for photosynthesis. Increasing in size, plants changes, that is, develop. Growth and development are strongly linked and depend on environmental conditions. Reproduction provides the most essential function for all living things, for continuality of life from generation to generation. Plants can reproduce by seeds, as well as by separate parts of their bodies, asexually. For example, cuttings, rose, tubers and its part, dahlia, bulbs, tulips, creeping stems, strawberry, roots, asterbe. In summer, we often see that different insects, bees, bumblebees, butterflies, beetles and flies, fly from one flower to another one. They are attracted to the sweet flower juice that is called nectar. In addition to nectar, flowers have pollen. When a bee lands on a flower, pollen remains on the woolly body of the insect. Flying to another flower of the plant of the same species, a bee transfers pollen to it, that is, pollinates the flower. After that, a fruit with seeds starts developing from it. Insect pollinators help plants reproduce. Fruit and seeds are great travelers that are spread by means of wind, water, and a human being. For instance, well-known greater burdock. Have you ever wondered why it has such sticky fruits? Sticking to animal fur, bird feather, or even human clothes, they appear many meters or even kilometers from the mother plant. From this perspective, people and animals promote dissemination of the given species. You see how everything is wonderfully arranged in nature. Bees and butterflies fly, carrying pollen from flower to flower. If there were no insects, many plants would not be able to pollinate and bear fruit. Pollinators, in their turn, receive food in the form of nectar or a part of pollen. In light of this, everything is united in our nature. Plants are incorporated with other organisms in the biosynthesis, a part of the ecosystem consisting of interconnected components of nature, plants, mushrooms, animals, and bacteria. In turn, the biotic community is associated with the biotop, an area of uniform environmental conditions providing a living place for specific assemblage of plants and animals. Chapter 4. Plants and the Environment. Where do plants live? Their natural sites, forests, meadows, swamps, ponds, and etc. The natural surroundings give them energy, help grow, and develop harmoniously. In nature, different plant species do not exist independently for each other, but together, forming plant communities, or phytosynosis, forest, meadow, swamp, pond, and all ecosystems where you can find special plant communities. Plants with different heights form layers in communities. Layerage is a spacing according to needs in water, heat, light, and etc. For example, representatives of the upper layers are long day, and shrubs, herbs, and mosses in the forest are more shade requiring. It is always easier to classify plant communities by the predominant life form of plants forming the first layer. For instance, trees, spruce, pine, birch, oak, are dominated in the woods. Such forests are called spruce, pine, mixed, or deciduous. Herbs dominate in meadow communities. Plants depend on environmental conditions. Some plants can survive in steaming hot places. Others prefer coolness. There are plants that favor a dry place, others wet. Some plants would rather choose direct sunlight, while others feel better in the shaded areas. In nature, each species has its own environmental niche that is adapted to the relevant set of environmental conditions. Plant ecology studies the relationships between plants and their environment. This science helps people recreate the conditions to which plants are accustomed in their natural habitat competently in order to provide their comfortable and long existence. In different parts of the world, the environmental conditions are different. Plus, environmental concerns, everything that is able to affect a plant, vary enormously, even in one region. You be the judge. Are the living conditions in the forest and in the city similar? Both in the north of the region and the south. Environmental concerns are divided into biotic, abiotic, and anthropogenic. Biotic concerns are wildlife factors, pollinators, phytophages, those who eat plants, other plants, etc. Abiotic concerns are factors of inorganic nature, climate, air, composition, moisture regime, content, and properties of the soil and etc. Anthropogenic factors are human influence, cities, factories, cars, roads and other objects located near the places of plant growth. To survive, each plant adapts differently to environmental conditions. Each species has certain adaptations to living conditions occupied in its environmental niche. The detrimental effect of environmental factors often impacts on the condition and appearance of the plant. Keeping a close eye on its condition, it is possible to discover that something goes wrong with plants and afterward assume some measures. Nowadays, people occupy more and more territories on the planet Earth for their needs, so that the corners of original nature are almost gone. If you watch the movie Avatar, you probably remember how a world of fantastic creatures had disappeared because of the magic tree death. In fact, all the plants and animals in our world are the same magical creatures that depend on the surrounding conditions. It depends on us either to keep them alive or destroy. The choice is still with humanity. Chapter 5. The evolution of a plant from a seed to a flower. Any plants, even quite different, have roughly the same stages of development. In the first instance, they are so extremely small that they are not ill-disguised. Then they grow and become stronger step by step. Some of their stems lignify, for example, as trees and shrubs have. Well, let's find out how a beautiful plant grows from a small seed. That process is absolutely bang on. The major stages of the flower life cycle. 1. The first stage. Embryonic. Begins with the embryo formation and lasts until the seed stage. 2. The second stage. Vegetative. Begins with the seed germination and continues until the first flowering. In the first place, a plant forms a germ. Its development depends on nourishment accumulated in the seed by the mother organism. As and when form vegetative organs, a plant come to independent life completely. 3. The third stage, generative, begins with the appearance of the generative organs. 4. The fourth stage, final, shows that a plant loses the ability to form generative organs and growth slows down. As the total duration of plant life is different, the length of these periods is individual. Yearly plants pass all stages for a year. Biennial ones in the first year are in the vegetative period, and in the second year they go to the generative period. Perennial plants have a longer generative period, when they form a large number of seeds, providing the spread of its species. Herbaceous plants usually have the following stages of development during the growing season. Beginning of seed germination, emergence of seedlings, growing period of stem, leaves and roots, flower buds appearance, flowering, early formation of fruits and seeds, gestation of fruits and seeds. The end of vegetation is the death of the above ground and underground parts, root system of a plant. Seeds of different plants vary in shape, color, size and weight. However, all seeds have the same texture plan. They consist of a rill, embryo, and maintain supplies of nutritious matters necessary to provide seed with energy to germinate. The main part of the seed is the germ, or rudiment of a new plant. It consists of a germ root, the germ of a new root, the germ stem, the germ of a new stem, the germ buds. It develops leaves, branches, flowers and plants, and cotyledons. The number of cotyledons in the seed of the plant is an important sign. It is used in the division of all flowering plants into two large groups, monocotyledons and dicotyledons. Plants whose seeds have one cotyledon are called monocotyledons. Rye, wheat, onion, etc. Plants with two cotyledons in their seeds are dicotyledonous. Cucumber, pumpkin, peas, beans, apple tree, etc. What is important to know about seeds? 1. In most plants, the seeds do not germinate immediately after falling from the parent plant, but remain dormant for some time. This means that they actually sleep while they are kept in a cool, dry place. Some seeds eventually deteriorate, lose the ability to germinate, while others can be stored for a long time. Thus, the seed of the date palm was sprouted 2,000 years ago. 3. The most important thing that the seed needs for germination is heat, moisture, and oxygen. Some seeds need sunlight, others need darkness. When the seed sprouts, the root comes first. Roots fix plants in the soil and keep throughout life. It is through them that mineral nutrition comes, water and dissolved salts. From the root goes up the stem with leaves and buds. This part is called a scape. Each type of bud location on the shoots, their shape, size and color are different. On these grounds, you can determine the type of tree or shrub even in winter. In the direction of growth of the stems are divided into 1. Erect, grow vertically upwards, sunflower. 2. Ascendent, climbing up, entwine support, filled bindweed. 3. Rising, the lower part of the stem lies on the ground, and the upper rises, cinquefoil. 4. Climbing, climb up, clinging to the support roots, ivy. 5. Procumbent, lying on the earth's surface, not rooted, leucostrife, monterey. 6. Creeping, creep on the ground, periodically rooting, buttercup creeping. The growth of the escape begins with the bud. This is especially important in crop production, because the development of shoots can be controlled by giving the plant the desired shape. If you cut off the top of the shoot, it will cease to grow in length and begin to give lateral processes. There are buds, giving shoots growth, and buds from which flowers develop. For a plant, a flower is an opportunity to multiply, because after the end of flowering, a fruit appears in its place, and seeds inside the fruit. When the fruit ripens, the seeds give life to a new plant. Chapter 6. Humans and Plants. You see what an important role plants play in people's lives. Our green friends enrich the air with oxygen. Probably when you walked in the city along highways, and then appeared in a green park, at once felt a difference. Where did you like the air better? Where there are a lot of trees? Or where the sea of cars? I think the answer is obvious. But in addition to enriching the atmosphere with oxygen, plants benefit humanity in other areas. What did you eat for breakfast today? Maybe oatmeal porridge? Or wheat flour pancakes with sweet jam of strawberries, raspberries, currants? And for lunch, you probably had a vegetable salad of tomatoes and cucumbers, seasoned with sunflower oil, and hot soup with carrots and potatoes. What are these dishes made of? That's right, from plants. And how happy my mother is when she is given a bouquet of tulips or mimosa on March 8. The house immediately becomes festive as soon as a vase of flowers appears on the table. A human helps plants to develop, to give higher yields, to survive in difficult environmental conditions. Such a branch of agriculture as crop production is engaged with cultivation of cultivated plants. Knowledge of the lawns of plant development helps people to grow them. Examples of crops grown in Moscow and the Moscow region. 1. Grain, wheat, rye, oats, corn, buckwheat. 2. Vegetable, cabbage, onions, garlic, tomatoes, cucumbers. 3. Fruit, apples, pears, cherries, plums. 4. Berry, garden strawberry, strawberries, currants, gooseberries, raspberries. 5. Floral, chrysanthemums, asters, peonies, roses, hyacinths, gladioli. The science that deals with the selection and cultivation of plants for decorative purposes, called floriculture. It in turn is a direction of decorative gardening and is widely used in landscape design. People grow flowers to create bouquets, greenhouses, and green spaces of the open ground, as well as to decorate the premises. Cultivated plants belonging to the same species can sometimes be completely different from each other. Take a look. For example, as the rose hips are growing in the yard, and a variety of garden roses, will you say it is the same species? Varieties of cultivated plants are called varieties. The traditional approach to breeding new varieties is selection. How do you get such an amazing variety of varieties and forms? First, you need the source material, parent plants that have a high degree of necessary properties and features, for example, decorative. They are propagated, and from the offspring, selected individuals, in which this feature is most pronounced. Selection is the first and main method of selection. It is carried out for several generations, until the best result is obtained. Chapter 7. Gardening for Beginners. Floriculture is a simple task, but for him, and for any business, you need knowledge and certain materials. You can buy ready-made plants in the store, but to grow them with your own hands is much more interesting. A magic of seed germination, a real miracle of nature, which will be subject to you. Many flowers, trees and vegetables can be grown from seeds if the basic conditions for their growth are provided. One of the most obvious advantages of self-cultivation is that it is much cheaper than buying adult plants. It is understood that seeds need to be prepared and sown according to the recommendations on the package. This is usually done in early spring. 11 steps to grow flowers. Step 1. Select the container. You can use a container, tray, peat pot, or any container that is at home. The main thing is to do it in a small hole at the bottom to avoid the accumulation of excess moisture after watering. Ecological advice number 1. If you can use an empty paper cup from a drink bought in a cafe, it will be both environmentally friendly and beautiful. Ecological advice number 2. If you plan to transplant, the plant is not in a flower pot and in the open ground, it is better to use a peat pot, which can then be planted directly on the flower bed or garden. 2. Spread on the bottom of the container drainage. The soil is not caked and was sufficiently loose, as well as to ensure the outflow of excess moisture from the roots. It is necessary to pour a little drainage on the bottom, usually small stones, expanded clay, of the desired size, large or small, depending on the size of the container. Drainage can be bought at the flower shop. Step 3. Fill the container with soil. It is better to take a new, that has not previously used soil. It is also sold in the store. Remember, in the soil dug out on the street, pests, causative agents of various diseases and harmful substances can be contained. Step 4. Water the soil. To evenly moisten the surface, it is best to use a watering can with a nozzle or a spray. Ecological advice. It is not necessary to buy a sprayer. It can be made from used and well-washed spray from a cosmetic product. Step 5. Spread the seeds on the soil surface. Pre-soaked seeds should be distributed over the surface and covered with a layer of soil at 0.3 to 0.5 centimeters. Most often, the package is written what conditions need the seeds, when to plant them, to what depth, at what distance from each other. Step 6. Cover the container. It is necessary to cover the container with seeds with garden covering material to prevent drying of the soil and to protect seeds from light. Ecological advice. It is not necessary to specifically buy garden covering material, suitable fabric, a piece of plastic or plywood, etc. Step 7. Put the container in a warm place. Seeds germinate best at a temperature of plus 18 to 20 degrees and even higher. Step 8. Open the seedlings as soon as it sprouts. It is important to open the seedlings and expose it for light when sprouts appear. For example, you can place a container on a windowsill. The main thing is not to forget to regularly moisten the soil with a sprayer and make sure that there is no overheating. Step 9. Transplant seedlings. When the seedlings have several pairs of real leaves, it can be transplanted into flower pots. Before the transplant, you need to water the soil abundantly and then carefully get the seedlings from the soil. It is necessary to act carefully so as not to damage the thin roots. Having placed the seedlings in a pot, you should gently press the soil at the roots. Ecological advice. So as not to make your mum upset that someone took from the kitchen her favourite spoon, use the ice cream stick. Step 10. Put the transplanted plants in the shade. Sensitive seedlings can dry quickly in the bright sun, so after transplanting, it should be kept in the shade for a week until it takes root in new soil. Step 11. Plant seedlings in the open ground or a flower pot. Once the plants have grown, so that the roots begin to come out at the bottom of the pot through the holes, they can be transplanted to a bed or a larger pot. If you want to be healthy, temper. Are you aware of the information that plants also can and should be tempered? Therefore, after the transplant, they are briefly taken out into the street and put in a place protected from the wind and sun. The time spent in the air can be increased by an hour every day, so that the seedlings are accustomed to lower temperatures. Chapter 8. How to prepare the soil and seeds for planting. To plant what's healthy and strong, it does not require much. Suitable temperature, sunlight, sufficient moisture, and of course, high-quality soil. The soil is the top fertile layer of the earth. When growing plants, soil preparation is one of the basic tasks. The soil should be loose and light, so that the underground organs of the plant can breathe. In nature, fallen leaves, dead plants, and animals rot, enriching the soils with minerals. Agricultural crops actively absorb them from the soil, but when a person harvests, minerals do not return to the soil. As a result, the soil is gradually depleted. To replenish the nutrient content, make organic and mineral fertilizers. How to prepare the soil in the garden or vegetable garden. 1. In the fall, you must dig the ground in large clumps, not breaking them, before digging to make fertilizer, pour compost, manure, or humus. 2. Early spring is necessary to remove leaves and debris. 3. After the soil has dried up, lumps grind a rake and level. Before planting plants or sowing seeds, the soil is loosened. Do not dig again. To a depth of 5 to 12 centimeters. How to prepare seeds for planting. 1. At the first stage, it is necessary to sort, select the best and strongest, and calibrate, distribute by size, the seeds. 2. Most seeds require soaking in warm water before planting. The duration of soaking varies from crop to crop. Chapter 9. How to grow flowers at home. In winter, all nature falls asleep, covered with a white fluffy blanket, the snowflakes whirling in the warts, and the harsh blizzard sings the trees and plants of the lullaby that they are dormant until the spring and see colourful dreams. And what about people who do not fall into hibernation, but really miss the summer and the sun, the coolness of the forests and the aroma of flowers? Fortunately, people have learned to grow plants all year round at home. It's so amazing when the window frost, and on the windowsill, a riot of greenery and bright colours. Besides, not everyone has a garden or a garden. But absolutely everyone has a windowsill at home, which is quite possible to create a wonderful flower bed. Potted flowers are a corner of nature in every home. However, it is important to learn how to care for them. The main rule of the novice florist says, buying or planting a new plant, learn about the place of its natural growth to understand which conditions are optimal. Plants perceive light differently than humans. Where we're bright, they don't get enough sunlight. The best place for flowers in the house is the windowsill, closer to the window but low plants, and already behind them. The high, but they do not create a shadow. But among the plants, there are those for which it is suitable place in the shade, 2 to 3 meters from the window, such as philodendron climbing. And some say Ivy originary withstand the lack of sunlight for several months of the year. In the bright light they will suffer. Their leaves will begin to pale and shrivel. It is important to understand that at home it is necessary to create conditions for the plant that is as close to natural as possible, whether it is the level of illumination, irrigation regime, or soil properties. If the nature of the plant grows in open areas, then loves bright light, and if under the canopy of the forest, most likely direct sunlight will be fatal for him. Buying a new green pet, you need to get acquainted with the requirements of its watering, and of course, aware of the peculiarities of watering at different times of the year. As a rule, abundant watering is used for spring to autumn, moderate in winter, from late autumn to mid-spring. During the rest period, it is necessary to allow the soil to dry between watering. It is also important to choose the right soil, which in its properties will be as close as possible to the one in which the plant exists in nature. 8 universal rules of growing flowers at home. 1. Ensure proper lighting. Place the flowers, loving the lights, close the windows, and those that prefer shade, to put out of direct sunlight. 2. Make sure that the temperature in the room was not lower than 18 to 20 degrees, and humidity not less than 30 to 50%. It is important to avoid sudden changes in temperature. 3. Watering flowers should be taken into account the characteristics of the species and only after checking the soil moisture. You cannot pour cold water on them. It is possible to spray foliage only on those plants which love it. 4. In winter, the pallet should not be used for irrigation and to drain excess moisture. But in the summer, some plants feel better when pouring water into pallets. 5. Timely feed the plants with fertilizers according to the recommendations for specific species. 6. Find a permanent place for flowers in the house. 7. Make sure that the pot at the green pet was convenient. Transplanted into a new pot is necessary when the roots are completely filled with all the soil. The best time for this is the beginning of spring, March to April. 8. Be sure to monitor the hygiene of houseplants. We don't forget to brush our teeth in the morning. It is necessary to remove the dried branches and flowers. Wipe the leaves from the dust with a soft, damp cloth. Chapter 10. Different approaches to growing plants. Field crops growing in the fields, lawns and gardens. The horticultural gardens. These are different plants that require different approaches to cultivation. What will happen to rose if it is planted in the forest and not cared for? It is easy to grow flowers on your own in a big city, where among the asphalt there are only rare islands of the earth. Man has learned to control the growth and development of plants, helping them to live in the garden, or even in the city, both to get food, vegetables, fruits, berries, and to create beauty, flowers. Methods of cultivation of field, garden, and garden crops differ from each other. For the cultivation of each plant species, there are certain approaches, features of soil preparation, regularly, and amount of fertilizer, frequency of irrigation, etc. Some practical tips that are important to consider when growing flowers outdoors. 1. It is necessary to comply with the lighting requirements. 2. It is important to take into account the area of food, the surface of the earth occupied by the plant. It depends on the biological characteristics of the crop and variety, the age of the plant, the conditions of cultivation, etc. 3. When planting, it is necessary to provide the necessary distance between the plants. This is especially important when planting perennial flowers, some of which can grow to quite large sizes. 4. And of course, when parenting flowers, it is necessary to take into account their decorative value on the site. After all, first of all, we grow flowers in order to admire them. Taking into account the development of technologies, in addition to traditional, there are new approaches to growing plants. Today, in the laboratory, as well as in the industrial production of vegetables and flowers in greenhouses, hydroponics is often used. This is a special method of growing plants in artificial environments without soil, when food they get from the nutrient solution surrounding the roots. This method allows you to adjust the conditions for growth and development. Besides, it is less time-consuming than growing in the ground. Chapter 11. What fertilizers do plants need? When you study all day and then come home tired, how do you feel? That all energy was spent trying to listen to the teacher, to do exercises and solve problems, to seek and find correct answers to complex questions. And if it was a lesson in physical education, it seems that the forces do not remain. And that only means one thing. There is an urgent need to eat. Plants, like humans, need nourishment. What do plants eat when they are tired? And need an additional source of strength. Plants in the process of growth and development deplete the soil. Restore its fertility can be using organic and mineral fertilizers. Also, plants in small quantities require vital elements, which are called microelements: cobalt, copper, zinc, iron, molybdenum, manganese, etc. Most of all, the plant needs nitrogen, promotes growth. Potassium ensures the movement of organic substances from the leaves to the root and the development of underground organs. And phosphorus helps flowering and ripening of fruits. If these substances are not enough, the plant develops worse. For example, the lack of nitrogen inhibits growth. Small leaves are formed, their color is violated. Lack of potassium slows down the process of cell division, and stretching causes the death of the root tip. Stems develop weak and thin. When there is not enough phosphorus, metabolism stops, leaves turn yellow and fall off. If plants have such signs, they must be fed, fertilized, but it must be done very carefully. With an excess of fertilizer, plants suffer no less than their shortage. Choosing feeding, in addition to the characteristics of a particular plant, also take into account the properties of the soil. When and how to fertilize flowers. 1. It is recommended to buy in the store special mixtures for different flower cultures, which contain the necessary macro and micro elements. 2. When applying fertilizers, you need to follow the instructions for calculating their norms. 3. Organic fertilizers are introduced into the soil before planting, usually in autumn on the field, so that they have time to decompose. 4. At the beginning of the growing season, plants need nitrogen fertilizers. They can be made in spring. 5. At the beginning of flowering, important fertilizers containing potassium and phosphorus, they are usually applied in the autumn, so they are a bit disappeared over the winter and spring. 6. Perennial flowers should be fertilized at the end of growing season with potassium and phosphorus fertilizers, so that they are prepared for the coming winter. 7. In the process of flower growth is carried out feeding macro and micronutrients. 8. If the fertilizer gets on the leaf, it must be washed off with clean water. 9. Before feeding and after, it is important abundant watering. Chapter 12. How to protect flowers from enemies, pests and diseases. Plant enemies are coarse grasses, invaders, casual funguses and bacteria. To protect green friends from dangers, it is possible to use chemical, agrotechnical, mechanical, and biological methods. Nowadays, a key role belongs to chemical methods based on the use of chemical crop protection, products to protect them from disease, destruction of pests on already infected plants, and against coarse grasses. These methods are focused on pest control of various groups. They stand against fungal and bacterial diseases, insects, coarse grasses, ticks, and etc. Agricultural methods promote the proper growth and development of plants, thereby increasing their preservance to many invaders. These methods include proper preparation of the planted place, timely planting and sowing seedlings, use of healthy planting material, spatial isolation, separated of crops with common invaders, interchange planting of different crops, thorough soil cultivation, destruction of coarse grasses, ploughing, fertilization, proper cutting, use of resistant varieties, soil disinfection before prior to planting, mechanical methods, burning of dry, damaged branches, eggs of some invaders, insects removal, aphids, bugs, caterpillars, and etc., waste collection, old dead bark clearing. Biological control is the use of different organisms for pest control. Seeding of beans, kidney beans, marigolds, coriander, nettles, mint, cumming, basil, celandine, and etc. before planting. Inclusion fine-cut parts of these plants or water extract from them into infested soil. Seeding forage plants for winter, mustard, buckwheat, looping, and etc. Cultivation or involvement of insect-eating birds, tits and starlings. Use of broths and decoctions which are sprayed on leaves and buds against caterpillars. Chapter 13. Plants in the city. Plants are the most important part of nature around us. Thanks to them, we get food, building materials, medicines, raw materials for the manufacture of clothing. Without green plants, it is impossible to even breathe. Because of the formation of oxygen is the result of the process of photosynthesis. Human dependence on the plant world is very high. Due to urbanization, most of the world's population will soon be living in cities. Therefore, an important role is played by their landscaping. Necessary to improve the urban environment for humans, plants help to catch dust, reduce noise, give oxygen, and simply serve as a natural decoration. In order to successfully grow them, it is important to create favorable environmental conditions and reduce the impact of negative factors. Unfortunately, the state of the environment in cities is different from that in which plants live in a natural environment. Among the negative factors affecting the green space: 1. Car exhaust air pollution and dust. 2. In cities with tall houses, plants are often in the shade and suffer from a lack of light. 3. In summer, asphalt and concrete are heated by the sun, so the temperature in the city becomes too high. 4. Rainwater goes into the sewers, and plants suffer from lack of moisture. 5. The city annually collects and burns fallen leaves. It destroys harmful bacteria and larvae of pests, but does not return nutrients to the soil. 6. On city streets, large trees, such as linden, planted in tubes, their roots can only develop to a depth of 50 to 60 centimeters. Some people pick flowers, break off tree branches. Plants in the city are subject to severe stress, so they weaken their natural defense mechanisms, decreases resistance to drought, frost, winds, and harmful microbes. They start to get sick and die sooner or later. All this leads to the fact that the life expectancy of trees in the city is much less than in the natural habitat. So small-leaved linden in the forest can live 300 to 400 years. In the park, 120 to 150 years. And in the city, 50 to 80 years. What can we do to preserve the plants in the city? It is important to plant new plants in advance, which will replace the dying ones. Sick trees, it is sometimes better to replace a new one, so they do not affect healthy. Of course, it is a pity the old trees that decorates the yard for many years, but if it becomes a source of disease to other trees, it would hurt more. To hold litter picks not only in the spring, but all year round, monitor the purity of green spaces. Stop people who break branches and pull flowers. Chapter 14. Moscow is a city of ecological well-being. Today in Moscow, beautiful examples of landscape art have been created. For example, the Zarady Park, which contains a unique botanical collection illustrating the diversity of nature in our country. The territory of the park is divided into zones corresponding to the natural landscapes typical for Russia: the northern, conifers, riparian and mixed forest, birch, forest, steppe and meadow. The park uses different lighting modes corresponding to a certain time of the year. Every year in Moscow is held the International Festival of Gardens and Flowers Moscow Flower Show, a week of high fashion, garden and park art, during which the leading Russian and international landscape designers talk about new trends in the industry. And the young participants of the competition of children's projects, Planet of Flowers, are gardens created by their own drawings. And of course, Moscow government does its best to improve the overall environmental situation. Environmental issues are dealt with by a special unit of the Special Unit of Government of the capital, the Department of Natural Resources Management and Environmental Protection of Moscow deals with green issues. The spaces occupied by green spaces make up more than half of the city's territory. Today, there are 122 specially protected natural areas in Moscow. Every year, thousands of trees and shrubs are planted as part of the Million Trees campaign. In 2019, after a large-scale reconstruction carried out by the Department of Nature Management and Environmental Protection of Moscow, the pavilion Floriculture and Landscape Gardening, built in the early 70s of XX century, was reopened at the Vdunha. Today it houses one of the most modern museums of the capital, in an interactive format representing a diverse exhibition of flowers of the world. It includes both unique samples growing on the territory of Russia and rare pearls of the world flora. With the help of the latest technologies, visitors will be able to get acquainted with rare flowers and learn the amazing secrets of the world of plants. Conclusion. According to the expert's opinion of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature Resources, as of 2019, 157 species of world flora are extinct or no longer found in the wild. And there is information only known about species to science. Who do you think can save endangered plant species from destruction? Who can help to preserve the natural balance and improve the environment in your city? A human being can do it, and this human is you. If we each set sights on nature, environmental hazards to all living things, we will be able to figure out how to find a way out of this difficult situation. If we each lead a conscious way of life, save electricity, sort waste, and take them separately, plant trees, not to litter on the street, teach other people it, our common nature will have a whole ecological army of real defenders. We offer you to sign the oath of a tree hugger of Moscow, the ecological manifest of the people of Moscow. I promise to take care of the environmental safety, not to pluck plants, plant trees, save energy and water, collect waste separately, protect all that surrounds us to save the planet Earth.